Hello grade 7 students, and welcome back to math and our first video in the new unit, which is going to be on integers. And I just showed you a video from NASA, and did that for a reason. You may have noticed I highlighted a couple of points in that video where at one point the mission control was saying we're at t minus 25 seconds, and then t minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, and so on until we got to time 0, which was exactly the point at which that rocket, Apollo 11, was going to take off, or lift off. That's the point at which it begins to leave the ground, is right at time 0. There was a point later in the video, about 30 seconds into the mission, of course, when he said t plus 30 seconds. So that would have been out past this side of our number line. And the way that all mission launches happen is that time 0 is the liftoff point, and everything else is measured in time relative to that, either after or before. So that's why we were back off the number line on this side at t minus 25 seconds, and then we eventually got a countdown at 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, etc. to the point of liftoff. So that's one point where negative numbers, negative integers, come into our day-to-day language. Another place that's fairly common is on the thermometer, in which case the number line, instead of going horizontally, tends to go vertically. But if you look at a typical thermometer scale, 0 degrees Celsius is where water begins to freeze. And then, of course, we go up 10 and 20, etc. in the upward direction. But when we come down, we get to minus 10 degrees Celsius, minus 20 degrees Celsius, etc. Guess I should make it clear that these are positive values up here. So just a few places where we use integers in day-to-day life. If you think about it, if you have money in the bank, let's say $3 in the bank, okay, it's not a lot, but hey, you got $3 in the bank, that's going to be positive $3. That's sitting right here on our number line. However, what if you owe somebody some money? Let's say somebody lent you a toonie so you could get something done on a certain day, and now you owe them that amount of money. If you wanted to know how much money you actually have, well, you would use this integer here. You have minus 2 or negative $2. 2 before the 0. Another place that we naturally encounter integers is in the idea of levels above or below sea level. So here, I've drawn sea level. If you think of this as the surface of the ocean right here, and then a mountain over on the right, sea level is considered to be an elevation of 0 meters. If we look at where the bottom of the sea is, depends what sea we're looking at, but we could imagine maybe that in this case it is at a level of negative 2,000 meters. So that's how you express it as an integer, negative 2,000. In layman's terms, we would just say it's 2,000 meters below sea level. And in this case, if this mountain happened to be, let's say, 1,500 meters high, then we would say it's 1,500 meters above sea level. Or as an integer, we could say it's at positive 1,500 meters. Notice also that in the world of integers, if we move to the right from 0, our numbers get larger and larger in value. It really happens the same way as we move to the left of the 0. We have a 5, a 10, a 15, 20, 25. The absolute value of these numbers is growing as we move in that direction. However, the actual value of these numbers is getting less and less. So we would always say that negative 15 has less value than negative 5, which obviously has less value than positive 5. And a place where this is maybe a little more apparent is when we talk about time in terms of years. And if I just change this to be, say, minus 500, the way that we refer to this in time is 500 BC, meaning before Christ. And you can see if we're at the year 0 when Christ was born, 500 BC is earlier in time, and 1000 BC, which could be represented as negative 1,000 years, which I'll write here, negative 1,000. You can see the numbers growing, but the value or the distance back in time, we're getting lower and lower and lower if you think about moving back toward the beginning of time, if we can even imagine such a thing. So although it may seem a bit odd at first, we would say in all cases with integers, that negative 1,000 is less than negative 500. Just as we would say that 5 is less than 10. Over here we could say that 15 is greater than 5. And on this side, we could say that negative 500 is greater than negative 1,000. So you almost have this opposite effect. The larger absolute value here is greater than the 5, but here the larger absolute value, or if we look here, is less than the absolute value of the 500. But that's because we aren't looking at the absolute value, we're looking at the actual value, which is negative 1,000 is less than 500. Another way to think of it is, if it's to the left on the number line, it's less than. And if it's to the right on the number line, it's greater than. So that will always save you. So if we're considering this one and this one, that's negative 13, this is negative 4. Because the 13 is to the left, we can say that negative 13 is less than negative 4. And because the negative 4 is to the right, we can say the negative 4 is greater than the negative 13. Even though at first that can seem a little bit counterintuitive, but that is true. So anything that lies to the right of something else is greater than. Anything that lies to the left of something else is less than. So, things to keep in mind or to remember are terminology. Positive, as we move this way from 0. Negative, as we move this way from 0. Opposite, equal distance from 0. So that is opposite to that. Also, when we want to compare the value of integers, this symbol means greater than. Greater than. So as we read a book from the left to the right, you can think of this as the mouth of a crocodile. It will always open up and eat the larger value. So in this case, the negative 5 has greater value than the negative 30, because the negative 5 is to the right of negative 30, which is way out over here. So that's the greater than symbol, the opposite being the less than symbol. And so now again the crocodile's mouth will open to the bigger value. So I might say here that negative 5 is less than 0. And yes, even though 0 means nothing, it's still a bigger meal than negative 5, which would mean losing food that's already there. And that's an image we don't want to think about right now.